Hi, and welcome to Caterpillar Cross Stitch. My name is Ford, and this week I'm going to be talking to you about the questions that people ask and the things that people say to cross stitchers that really leave us cringing. Now, before we dive into this topic, I want to take just a second here and ask you to do me a favor. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and when we're done, leave me a comment. It doesn't cost you anything other than a few seconds, but it makes a really big difference for me. So if you'd take just a moment right now and do that, I would really appreciate it. Now, every craft and every crafter has certain things that kind of annoy them, that people will say or do whenever they see them working on their project or sharing a finish that they've completed. I'm going to talk about some of the ones that come up the most often in the spaces that I'm in. The first one is really about people not knowing the difference between varying fiber arts. And it's not really that big of a deal, but for some reason it tends to get on our nerves. So you'll be stitching in public and somebody will come up to you and go, "Oh, are you knitting?" Like knitting and crochet, unless you really know, it's kind of hard to tell them apart. Cross stitch and embroidery or needlepoint, unless you know specifically, they're a little bit hard to tell apart. But knitting and cross stitching, they both involve fiber, but that's kind of about where the similarities end. But this one happens often enough that there's like a meme for it. Let me see if I can get into the right. Is this knitting? So there's not really anything to be done about this, but it is something that kind of bugs us. Now there's another one that kind of gets under our skin for a really different reason, and that's when people say something like, "Isn't that kind of an old lady hobby?" And I think part of the reason that that one bothers us is because there are a lot of us in a new kind of modern style of cross-stitching that have kind of brought it back into the 21st century. And the idea that it's something that only little old ladies do or that, Victorian housewives do is part of what kind of caused the hobby to fall off for a little while there and made it more difficult to find quality supplies. It is experiencing a resurgence, and there are people from all generations that have discovered the joy of this wonderful hobby. So that one kind of gets under our skin a little bit. I want to take just a second to remind you to go join the Caterpillar Cross Stitch Stitch Club email newsletter. You'll get all of the latest news on any upcoming projects or products that Caterpillar will be coming out with, as well as any future retreats or socials, those kinds of things. And as soon as you sign up, you'll get an ebook with 9 free PDF cross-stitch patterns in it and a digital download of our top 10 cross-stitching tips. So make sure that you hit that link down there in the description so that you don't miss out on any of those. Now, every once in a while, just due to the vagaries of social media and algorithms, a finished cross stitch will go kind of viral. When I mention that, you probably have one in mind that you've seen posted all over Twitter or TikTok or Facebook or wherever you happen to frequent. For me, the one that was the bane of my existence for nearly a year was the one that said, "Warning, this is proof that I have patience to stab something 1,000 times." For one thing, the O's in that pattern were not all the same size, and every time someone posted it on my Facebook wall, it would just make my eye twitch just a little bit. And, I love it when people share these kinds of things with me and they know that I'm interested in it. So I do get excited about that. Just about the 40th time that someone DMs you a particular project, it can get a little tiresome. Now, one of the great things about cross-stitching as a hobby is that it's really easy to do while socializing and around others. And if you don't have anybody in your life who also stitches that you can get together and work with, it's really valuable to have an online community, such as the one that has grown up around the Caterpillar Cross Stitch brand. There's a huge Facebook with tens of thousands of members and hundreds of thousands of years of accumulated experience, as well as an amazing following of the Caterpillar Cross Stitch Instagram. So make sure that you check both of those out. Another one that I personally get pretty frequently is people saying, like, "How do you have the patience to do that?" And I think that that comes from a place of misunderstanding of how doing something process-oriented like cross-stitching affects your brain and affects your brain chemistry. And for me, it actually makes me much more patient. It really helps me address my ADHD in the way that that affects my life. So for me, it's quite meditative and helps me get into a clearer headspace if I can just do a few stitches at a time. So the assumption that it's boring or that it's tedious is something that kind of gets under my skin personally a little bit, because yes, it is a very meticulous hobby. It is a very detail-oriented hobby, but that for me does not mean that it's tedious. It's extremely engaging and really makes my brain produce those little happy brain chemicals that I need so much. So the underlying assumption of this question is part of why it's a little annoying. Another one that I hear occasionally that is a little bit frustrating because it's sort of dismissive of the craft of our hobby is when people say something like, oh, you follow a pattern, so you're not doing original art. Which, like, this is not really something that you would say to someone in another art or craft. Like if somebody had used an outline design to make a piece of stained glass, you wouldn't undermine their artistry by saying, oh, you followed a pattern, somebody else already drew that. Or if somebody made an amazing, delicious, and beautiful, cake, like 3-tier opera cake or something like that, you wouldn't say, oh, you followed a recipe, so you didn't really do it yourself. But people, for some reason, feel okay saying that to cross-stitchers, whereas like we put a lot of time and effort into it, and the beauty of it and how good it comes out depends very much on our artistry and on our craftsmanship, right down to the choosing of what materials that we use. So it's kind of dismissive to say that because we follow a pattern sometimes, that it means that it's not really a piece of art. So that's one that gets me. Another one that'll bug people, and that is probably because it betrays a certain amount of traditionalism and gatekeeping, is to ask to see the back of somebody's project. Oh, let me see the back. Because a lot of people who were taught a very rigid and old-fashioned way of cross-stitching will have an idea that your quality as a craftsperson depends on how good the back of your cross-stitch project looks. And personally, I don't care about that. I care about the back only insofar as it affects how the front is going to look, because that's the part that I'm working on. And some people don't even care that much about that. They just want to get it done, and it's all about the process, and it's all about going through it for them. They don't care that much about making everything perfect and every little stitch tidy, and that's a totally valid way of doing it too. So the kind of judgmentalness that underlies this question is why it gets irksome to some people, I think. Now, whenever somebody posts a finished photo of a completed cross-stitch online that's not in a cross-stitching oriented community, you almost always get people saying like, have you ever thought of starting an Etsy? Have you ever tried to sell these? And for those of us who've looked into it, this kind of gets on our nerves because it underestimates how much time and effort we put into a cross-stitch project. Like a 5x7 full coverage cross-stitch could take dozens of hours to complete. And if we value our time at even like the average wage in your area, which like I could go get a job at a fast food place right now making $15 an hour. So that would be the absolute minimum that I would value my cross-stitch time at. A 5x7 full coverage cross-stitch would probably cost like $900 just for the time, not counting the materials and the finishing that I put into it. So this kind of question sort of undervalues the time that we put in, and that's why it gets on people's nerves a little bit. And then the other thing is that like we don't need to monetize everything that we do. Some things we do just for the joy of it. Some things we should be doing just for the sake of creating art. We don't need to be monetizing our hobbies, because that's a really surefire and rapid way to just suck all the joy right out of that hobby, is to try to turn it into a business and into a side hustle. Not everything has to be a hustle. Some things we can do just for their own sake. Art and fiber arts are one of those. So stop trying to tell people to monetize their joy. And probably the question that comes up the most often when we discuss this topic is someone, usually a family member, but sometimes just a close acquaintance, saying, "Ooh, will you make me one of these?" and showing you a picture of, it seems almost invariably, some enormous, complicated project that would take months or years to finish. Personally, I'll usually say, I will teach you how to do it. We can go shopping, we can get the supplies, I can teach you the techniques that you need to know in order to be able to finish this project, but no, I won't stitch that project for you. And there are a number of reasons that that's the case. One is they're probably not going to respect how much time that actually takes, how much effort actually goes into it. They're not going to value that gift the way I value that gift. I don't stitch things for other people usually. I mostly only stitch for my own enjoyment. And a project that somebody else is excited about that I'm not necessarily excited about, I'm probably not going to finish. And if I bog down in the middle of a project, it's going to stall my work on all of my other projects. So I'm not really willing to risk that. Another factor in that is what's known among knitters and crocheters as the curse of the boyfriend sweater, which is if you start working on a large project for someone, odds are very, very good that you will have a big falling out with that person before you get to the end of it, because the fates have a cruel sense of humor. So you don't want to risk the boyfriend sweater curse by making a big project for somebody else, personally. So what about you? Is there a question that you frequently get while you're cross-stitching that really makes you roll your eyes or cringe? Leave it in the comments down below and join the discussion. If you have a topic you'd like to see me cover on the channel, you can leave that in the comments as well. I do want to thank you so much for watching. For Caterpillar Cross Stitch, my name is Ford, and I will see you next time.